Puss in Boots. There lived once a miller in a town. He died. At his death, he had nothing to leave to his 3 sons except his mill, his ass, and his puss. The eldest son took the mill, the second took the ass. As for the youngest, all that remained was the puss. The youngest son grumbled. "My brothers," said he, "will be able to earn an honest living. When I have eaten my puss and sold his skin, I shall die of hunger." The puss sitting beside him overheard this. "Nay, master," the puss said, "don't take such a gloomy view of things. If you will get me a pair of boots, made so that I can walk through brambles or bushes without hurting my feet, and give me a bag, you shall soon see what I am worth." The puss's master was so surprised to hear his puss talking. At once he got the puss what he wanted. The puss drew on the boots and slung the bag around his neck. He set off for a rabbit warren or habitat. When the puss got there, he filled his bag with carrots and lettuces, which were favorite for rabbits. He stretched himself out beside it as if dead. The puss waited until some young rabbit should be tempted into the bag. This happened very soon. A fat, thoughtless rabbit went in headlong. The puss jumped up at once. He pulled the strings and killed the rabbit. The puss was very proud of his success. The puss went to the king's palace and asked to speak to the king. When the puss was shown into the king's presence, he bowed respectfully, laying the rabbit down before the throne. The puss said, "Sir, here is a rabbit which my master, the Marquis of Carabas, desires me to present to your majesty."
"Tell your master," said the king, "that I accept his present. I am very much thankful for him."
A few days later, the puss went and hid himself in a cornfield and laid his bag open as before. This time splendid partridges or birds were lured into the trap. The puss also took these to the palace and presented to the king from the Marquis of Carabas. The king was very pleased with this gift. He ordered the messenger of the Marquis of Carabas to be handsomely rewarded. For 2 or 3 months, the puss went on in this way. He carried game every day to the palace, saying it was sent by the Marquis of Carabas. At last, the puss happened to hear that the king was going to take a drive on the banks of the river. He would be with his daughter, the most beautiful princess in the world. At once he went to his master. "Master," said he, "if you follow my advice, your fortune will be made. Go and bathe in the river at a place I shall show you. Then, I will do the rest." "Very well," said the miller's son. He did as the puss told him. When he was in the water, the puss took away his clothes and hid them. Just as the king's coach went by, the puss ran to the road, calling out as loudly as he could, "Help, help, the Marquis of Carabas will be drowned." The king looked out of the carriage window. When he saw the puss, who had brought him so many fine rabbits and partridges, he ordered his bodyguards to rush at once to the rescue of the Marquis of Carabas. Then the puss came up to the carriage and told the king that while his master was bathing, some robbers had stolen all his clothes. The king immediately ordered one of his own magnificent suits to be taken to the marquis. When the miller's son appeared before the monarch and his daughter, he looked so handsome. He was so splendidly attired that the princess fell in love with him on the spot. The king was so struck with his appearance that he insisted upon his getting into the carriage to take a drive with them. The puss, delighted with the way his plans were turning out, ran on ahead of the carriage. He reached a meadow where some peasants were making hay. The puss said to peasants, "Hey, good people, the king comes this way now. If you do not tell the king the meadow you are mowing now belongs to the Marquis of Carabas, you shall all be chopped up into little pieces."
When the king came by, he stopped to ask the haymakers to whom the meadow belonged. "To the Marquis of Carabas, your majesty," answered they, trembling because the puss's threat had frightened them terribly.
The puss continued to run before the carriage. Now he came to some reapers. "Hey, good people," said he, "if you do not tell the king that all this corn belongs to the Marquis of Carabas, you shall all be chopped up into little pieces."
The king again stopped to ask to whom the land belonged. The reapers, obedient to the puss's command, answered, "To the Marquis of Carabas, your majesty."
All the way the puss kept running on before the carriage, repeating the same instructions to all the laborers he came to. The king became very astonished at the vast possessions of the Marquis of Carabas. At last the puss arrived at a great castle, where an ogre lived who possessed all that land. All the lands through which the king had been riding were part of his estate. The puss knocked at the castle door and asked to see the ogre. The ogre received him hospitably and asked him what he wanted. "If you please, sir," said the puss, "I have heard that you have the power of changing yourself into any sort of animal you please. I came to see if it could possibly be true."
"So I have," replied the ogre. In a moment he turned himself into a lion.
This gave the puss a great fright. He scrambled up the curtains to the ceiling. "Indeed, sir," he said, "I am now quite convinced of your power to turn yourself into such a huge animal as a lion. But I do not suppose you can change yourself into a small one such as a mouse, for instance?"
Indeed, I can, cried the ogre, indignantly.
In a moment, the lion had vanished. Then, a little brown mouse frisked about the floor. In less than half a second, the puss sprang down from the curtains. He pounced upon the mouse and ate him all up before the ogre had time to return to any other shape. When the king arrived at the castle gates, there stood the puss upon the doorstep. He bowed and said, "Welcome to the castle of the Marquis of Carabas." The Marquis helped the king and the princess. The puss led them into a great hall. There a feast had been spread originally for the ogre, now for the Marquis of Carabas and his company. The king was so delighted with the good looks, the charming manners, and the great wealth of the Marquis of Carabas that he said the Marquis should marry his daughter. The Marquis, of course, replied that he should be only too happy. The very next day, he and the princess got married. As for the puss, he was given the title of Puss in Boots. Now he only caught mice for his own amusement.